On this episode of the Minutemen Initiative, we are going to be jumping back into reconnaissance, and the sub-discipline of reconnaissance we're talking about today is urban reconnaissance. So a couple episodes ago, we talked about rural reconnaissance, and we broke down a lot of very fundamental basics that apply to pretty much all reconnaissance missions in that episode. So if you haven't tuned into that episode, jump back in there and check that one out. But today we're going to be focusing specifically on urban reconnaissance and a lot of the skills that you need to be capable in that area. So super important skill, especially for those of you that are located in urban environments or located around urban environments. Reconnaissance mission as a whole is super important for the modern Minuteman to understand. I think it's one of the most important capabilities for the modern Minuteman. So I hope you guys really enjoy the episode today, and we're going to break this thing down. So we'll see you on the other side.
Back and dude, it's holiday season and things are already getting weird. Dude,
already getting weird.
Oh yeah, dude, me and you coming out of the store the other day.
Oh dude, the react to contact,
the react to ambush, dude.
Yeah,
dude, we were literally like, we had to go to Walmart to go pick up like a printer and some stuff. We were trying to upgrade some stuff in the storefront, but
the amount of printers that we've bought in this past year.
Yeah, dude, printers just don't last long at all anymore.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
But we do work our printers into the ground, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are not saving trees up here, dude.
No.
We're printing out trees like crazy, dude.
That's true.
Reams of trees.
Yeah. But, dude, we were literally coming out of a store, and it was the weirdest thing ever. So we'd like exited out the door, like we were leaving back toward the parking lot. And we'd gotten like if we were still at the door, it'd be one thing and it wouldn't be that weird. Like if someone started running at you because you're standing in front of the door.
Yeah.
But we'd gotten way past the door, like to the point that we'd gotten past the little like, you know, the entry road past, like we've almost crossed that to like where the parking lot starts. And dude, we look over, like, in our left, like, both of us in the corner of our eyes. We didn't really get to talk about it till after, but we just see this dude, like,
in our periphery, dude.
Just mad dashing at us from our left. And I'm pushing the cart, like, with the stuff in it, and Jacob's off to my left. And, dude, we just immediately both, like, kind of turned toward him, like, because I think it both caught our attention at the same time. Like, what the heck is this guy doing? Like, why is he running at us?
Yeah.
And he was like off in our peripherals far enough that we couldn't fully see. He had something in his hand. It was like he had something random in his hand. I don't even know what it was. It almost looked like a little. I don't even know what that thing was. It was something gray,
yeah.
Like a lunchbox. It's like the size of a lunchbox almost.
That's what made it even more weird. It was the full run towards us, and like you said, we exited the store. And so we had crossed beyond the natural entrance point of the store. So he was running at us, you know.
Dude.
So and then had something weird in his hand. And so it fully engaged it engaged the fight, flight, or freeze response, dude. And we went into fight, dude.
Dude, we turned toward him so fast. Like,
yeah.
Dude, he immediately switched directions as soon as we all made eye contact.
Dude,
and he like turned his direction back toward the door. It was super random. I don't know what he was trying to do, but it was super weird. And I think we threw him off like the way we reacted, but we like reacted to like it was literally like a close ambush. Like, yeah, we turned into the ambush and started to move toward it.
We faced our plates towards the threat, dude. I mean, we both turned. I just remember, and I just subconsciously, or not subconsciously, but just involuntarily just said, whoa, what's this guy doing? Like super loud. And like,
someone throw a smoke.
Yeah.
No,
That turned. The funniest part is Steven was pushing the cart and just like went into like strafe mode with the cart, like like he's like looking to his left but turned his whole.
Yeah, I only had one arm on the cart.
Yeah.
I was just like, what in the world? Like, what is this guy doing?
And it happened so fast. Like
he turned immediately. As soon as we turned toward him, he turned away, like, and went toward the doorway. Like,
yeah, did you see his eyes?
Yeah, I think he realized
he saw us, and his eyebrows went up, and his eyes did like a fast blink open, like, oh, and like it freaked him out, I think, a little bit.
Yeah.
And then he immediately like turned to the right and sprinted into the store. But first of all, it's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, we're in a parking lot. There's cars all over the place. It's Christmas season, so there's people everywhere, like, frantically shopping. Like, what?
Yeah, he wasn't the only one out there either. That's what's weird. Like, there's other people crossing, like we were, and then crossing, like, actually in the right direction that they're supposed to be crossing, which is like toward the doorway.
Yeah.
And then there was just him that was cutting through everyone toward our direction.
Yeah.
Like, mad sprint right at us. And I'm just like, what is this guy doing? Like,
yeah, dude. I just see this man, or this like fast movement out of my periphery, and I'm just like, and that's that's when
Dude, I thought we were about to go hands on, dude. I thought we were about to just have to grab this dude by the arms.
Whoa! What's this guy doing?
and then after he turned, we like both are just like, well, that was weird.
Yeah.
And
I said that got me going a little bit. Steven said it got me going too. And we were in a dead conversation about something, and that conversation ended.
Yeah, I don't even know what it was. Yeah, it's gone. But anyways, yeah. So,
dude,
it's Christmas season. Be ready for all the weird.
Yeah, be ready for close ambushes.
Yeah, dude, it's weird out there, man. It's like been like that pretty much since, I guess, Black Friday. Like ever since Black Friday, and then it just like stays that way until finally Christmas is done.
Dude, and I hate Walmart. I hate Walmart. If I mean, we live in a small town. I know we're not secret about that. So there's not a lot of options here. Like if you need something quick and it's, like something like a printer or a computer or something, you've really got two choices. You can either go to Fred Meyer, which is better usually in general, or you can go to Walmart. The problem is though, is Fred Meyer, or at least the one we have here, it just doesn't have a lot of options for like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So you basically have Walmart. So you're stuck going in there. And I feel like every time we go there, I question all of humanity. I just look around at what's going on and I'm like, why has God stayed his wrath on the world? I'm just kidding, but kind of. But, oh, dude, Walmart's crazy. But so for all you Walmart lovers out there, you're a better man than I. I feel like I'm going into I don't know, another dimension when I go into Walmart. Maybe it's just the Walmart here. I think it's Walmarts everywhere, but
dude, Walmart's definitely like, if you're gonna find just crackhead shenanigans, it's gonna be at a Walmart, dude.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know what that is, because everything's cheap, I guess, at Walmart, but it's not really.
No,
Walmart goes through. It's weird. Walmart kind of goes through like ebbs and flows of like being really cheap and then being really expensive. I think it like is based off of how fast they're moving products off there.
Yeah.
Like they'll go super cheap if they're not doing well, and then as soon as like everyone realizes like, oh dude, every store around here is like really expensive, I'm gonna go shop at Walmart. And then like if you're not careful, you'll just be paying way more than all the other stores. Like,
yeah.
It's weird, dude. Like we went through that during COVID. Like Fred Meyer's is like normally where I shop because it's closer to my house, and so that's where I shop. And then, dude, the cost was like we cut the cost in half by going to Walmart. So we started shopping at Walmart, which is like a pretty good drive away from where I'm at. And it's like, well, whatever, like it's worth it. And then next thing you know, like, why does it seem so expensive again? Like, this seems like it's way too expensive for what it is. And then we start shopping at Fred Meyer's again. It's way cheaper. And it's like, all right, well, I guess you just got to stay on top of it. But
yeah,
the fact that we've gotten to that point in our economy that we're, having to be so picky and choosy on where we're shopping based off just so that we're not spending too much money is crazy, though.
Yeah.
It's like, man.
That's crazy. Yeah, dude. Well, what are we getting into today?
We're getting into rural reconnaissance, man. So
rural reconnaissance.
Just kidding. We're getting into urban reconnaissance. I'm just giving Flashback Friday, dude.
We just get in a loop and only talk about rural reconnaissance
No,
forever.
we're doing urban. There is a form of rural as far as like getting into the building, but so a lot of the steps that we covered in the last episode, we're actually going to kind of double down on again today. I'm going to breeze through them though, because obviously I would highly suggest, if you haven't listened to the rural reconnaissance episode, that you go back and listen to that one first.
Yes.
Before getting into this one, because it's going to dovetail and it's going to help better understand like some of the pre-movement work that you're going to have to focus on prior to getting to this urban location, whatever urban location you plan to use. All this being said, I'm going to start with this right now. Like, urban reconnaissance is not a super safe way to do reconnaissance. I think it's incredibly important to understand how to do, because sometimes that may be your only option to get a good actual like spot to do reconnaissance from.
Yeah.
Depending on what you're doing. So if you're like trying to get reconnaissance on like a center like group of buildings inside of a city, and then they got buildings all the way around them, and it's like, well, you're not going to be able to gather reconnaissance from outside of the building structure. So you're going to actually have to push into the buildings in order to gather reconnaissance on whatever you're trying to gather it on. But yeah, from a modern Minuteman perspective, it's incredibly dangerous to put yourself in a building. You're basically putting yourself in a coffin. So just understanding that like you're you have to be that much more disciplined when working urban type work. And not saying you shouldn't be that way when you're working rural either, but I'm just saying you got more flexibility as far as like things you can pull off in a rural environment versus an urban environment.
It's a lot easier to camouflage yourself in a rural environment than it is an urban environment.
Yep. So just like the rural reconnaissance, one of the most important steps is to make sure you have a good pre-mission brief. This is going to cover a lot of things we covered in the last one, talking about priorities of intelligence, kind of location type stuff that you're going to worry about, enemy, civilians in the area, things like that. How many guys are you moving in with? Are we rolling in with a big team? Are we rolling in with a small team? Are we going to have support teams alongside, like sniper teams or gun teams or anything like that? The route that you're going to take up to that point, you potentially may not know a ton about the building you're going into. If you've got like, I mean, you may be doing this in your own town or whatever, so maybe it's a building that you understand and you know the layout of. If that's the case, then obviously just in your pre-briefing, just like, if you only got one guy that knows the building really well, then obviously make sure he breaks it down like, hey, you got a hallway here, like you can just sketch out like the exact look of the building prior to going in. Like the more information you know, the better. Now, if you don't have that capability, a lot of it's going to be gathered on the site from outside of the building. You're going to try to gather intelligence from outside and do your best to figure out, like, piece it all together prior to going in. So, but we'll get to that here in a second. Your movement to the location, whether it's by foot, by vehicle, by whatever, obviously you're going to have all your rally points and emergency plans as far as like if you were to get compromised while mid-movement or whatever. So making sure to have like a very thorough pre-mission brief, and that's kind of it. That's a more simplified version of the way I put it last time. So like I said, if you haven't listened to the last one, go listen to the last one, because a lot of that stuff's going to dovetail over.
Yeah. And that stuff, a lot of those things apply to a variety of missions. Like your pre-planning phase and your actual like operational planning is super important. And like we mentioned in the last episode, in the rural reconnaissance episode, we'll probably do an entire episode on planning.
Yeah.
which I think would be super valuable. So, not probably, we will do that episode at some point. But we're going to keep pushing through these reconnaissance subdisciplines because I think they're, like we said last time, they're super applicable to the Minuteman and the modern Minuteman's capabilities as well, because it's leaning into small unit capabilities. It's more passive in nature. You know, you're gathering information and sifting through that to figure out what's intelligence, you know, and what's valuable. Intelligence gathering techniques are really important to understand. There's a little bit of a push going on in the gun culture, I guess, if you will, for that right now, which is good, because a lot of it's pretty basic. Like open source intelligence is something that we can all be practicing now. But this is very directed. Again, this is coming from the perspective, this whole episode is going to be from the perspective of a hostile environment, because you can always back down off of that. So all these reconnaissance episodes that we're doing right now are pretty much like kind of from the setting of worst case scenario, you know? So just keep that in mind. Like there's some things within urban reconnaissance that, you know, if you were in a less hostile or, you know, like an environment where you weren't just going to be killed by being out in the open, you know, there's a lot of things that could change, which we might get into in a later episode, like some of the more, like your civil reconnaissance kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just from that perspective, plan accordingly. Like Steven said, I agree. I mean, it's, you know, getting inside, like making entry into a building and holding up in a building is definitely a risk. But I know for a fact that there's a lot of listeners out there that's your setting and that's your community, and you need to understand how to operate in that community. So that's why we're going to be breaking this down in such detail today. Like immediately after we released the rural reconnaissance episode, we got messages from tons of people that were like, hey, I live in, you know, I'm like, that episode was helpful because I'm kind of in a mix. Like I live in a city, but there's rural communities like right outside of where I live. But like, what do I do for where I'm at, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is going to be some really important stuff, but the fundamentals pretty much all stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
So especially like for your planning and stuff like that, but there's a lot of niche differences as you move forward into this. So, I think I still hang on to the belief that being good at reconnaissance, if your Minuteman team or community is good at reconnaissance fundamentals, then that's going to carry over to a wide array of other capabilities.
Absolutely. So as far as movement, you're going to be trying to move to the objective rally point, very similar to the rural reconnaissance, whatever designated spot. That's going to be something that's kind of offset off the objective. And by objective, I'm talking about the building that you want to make entry on. So you're going to designate a spot that's going to be, you're going to have terrain features or some sort of veg block or something that you're not going to be compromised through. You're going to be very hidden, and also noise discipline. Obviously, you're still going to want to have noise discipline, but it's not going to be as easily compromised based off of sound, just because you do have that distance. So yeah, you're going to make movement very similar to the last one. Understand how to read a map, know your major terrain features, and your what's the word that I'm looking for? Secondary terrain features as well. That's not right, but whatever. Just know your terrain features. So,
your minor terrain features.
Yeah, there we go. Minor. Yeah, that's the word.
Major and minor.
Yeah. It's like, dude, what's the word? I can't think of it. So understand that, understand how to read a map, understand how to move through terrain where you don't get caught. So no skylighting over top of hills. And I mean, obviously there's sometimes there's no way around it. But if you can get away from it, stay away from it. So, understand how to move, through your rural area that you're trying to get to. If you're already in the city and you're pushing just to another building, that's just going to be more, we'll kind of get into that here in a second, but that's just going to be like, very security based. So making sure to have a team pulling security with a team moving, and then when that team's moving, just make sure to understand formations as far as like moving through building structures that you have, overhead coverage and 12 o'clock coverage, rear security, all that good stuff. So that just comes into it's not, there's no great way, like there's a great way to do it versus a bad way to do it, but I'm just saying like no way is actually like a super solid way to move through cities, just because, especially when you're talking small unit tactics, it's like you're down on a street level area and you got all this potentially, you got buildings that are multiple stories high, and it's like you're having to worry about multiple windows. It's like it's not great. So
it's very different from moving through a rural environment where you have the benefit of staying off of like groomed trails and staying off of roads. Like in an urban environment, you have to go in through the avenues that people are designed to go through. Which is a problem. I mean, that's you're basically being funneled through danger areas consistently as you're moving through a city. So
there's not a great way to do it, but understanding how to do it safely to the best of your ability is important. And I've always liked the diamond formation for that kind of type of work, but it just seems like it's a solid way to move, depending on how much space you have. If it's a tight little alley, then maybe you roll into like a rolling T or something like that. But it's not something that I can really explain over podcasts. So maybe research some of that stuff. There's great companies out there that show that type of movements, and we actually have some of that stuff on our IG as well. But
it's some just basic formation breakdown stuff, and we got a lot more content on the way. I would say for stuff like this, like there's a few ways you could kind of train for it, and you could do it in a way that doesn't look weird. You could, if you do live in an urban area and you've got a group of guys split up into two teams and have one team, like located in different buildings, if that's a possibility. And then have another team just, obviously this would be like slick, like no gear, just, regular clothes, like, everyday clothes on, because you'd probably get arrested pretty fast if you're doing this in like full kit. And just have the other team walk around and, but try to walk around, without being identified. And then you could use your cell phones or whatever and just say like, we see all of you guys, like we would have been able to engage all of you, and then you'll get an idea of, even if you only have a handful of people located in different buildings, how hard it would be. But the biggest things really, especially when you're talking like hostile environment, is like just take your time and watch your angles, watch your corners, maintain good security. Like you need to have heads on an absolute swivel, and don't get caught just looking in the same area. Like you need to be looking up and down, checking those obvious quick threat areas like windows, doors, scanning other corners of buildings very quickly and repeatedly. You got to be absolutely looking around and communicating everything while you're moving. Like if you see anything that could be a concern, then avoid that or set yourself up to defend that or defend against that. It's a lot, and it's why it's a more advanced
skill.
It's a more advanced skill, and being really good at patrol basics is going to help you. But there's a lot of skills that are specific to the urban setting that are needed. And one of those is CQB basics, like having a good understanding of CQB and CQB tactics. But most importantly, for this, especially movement to the objective, is having a really good grasp on security and threat identification. And those are two like sub categories you can kind of dive into and research how formation security works. But the biggest thing I see with all this that's a huge mistake, especially in training, is that people don't practice communication. And it's something that we harp on a lot when we go train.
Yeah.
It's like talk through everything, and we're in a training environment, so over communicate, and then that'll get you comfortable with talking through stuff. And it doesn't have to be like contact 7:00 moving. Like it doesn't need to be. It can literally be like, hey, I've got something I'm worried about right over here.
Yeah, there's a doorway right here on the right.
Yeah. Like, what is it?
Security or whatever.
Yeah.
Just like talk through.
There's an open window there, and I think I just saw somebody in it. Where at? It's right here, to the east. Like, just talk through it like a normal person. And the coolest part about it is the more you do that as a group, the more you learn each other, you understand each other, you build on top of that chemistry, and you get to the point where when you're walking out of the Walmart store and a guy's sprinting at you, all you got to say is, whoa, 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 what's this guy doing? And then you're both ready to throw down. So,
yeah,
no, I'm just kidding. But,
whoa, dude.
Yeah, no, it does become, you get to a point, you build to a point where there's less that has to be said because everyone understands how you're communicating and how you communicate. Now, I think there's value. Don't take that out of context and think that I'm saying that you shouldn't use clear and concise communication methods. Like, you should absolutely build to that. But from my experience, that's not something that you can just do, especially if you're not someone that comes from a military background.
Yeah.
I was going to say law enforcement as well, but honestly, more just military. I've worked with a lot of law enforcement guys, and that's not something that they do the same either. That's a very...
Yeah, they don't work team. A lot of law enforcement guys are working by themselves a lot of the time, so it's not necessarily a skill set that they have to learn to do.
Yeah, that communication, that clear, concise, rapid communication, almost like on the spot, and mixing that with that menagerie of other capabilities, talking about security specifically, is a very militaristic thing. So your guys with military backgrounds, it's just going to be part of, like, they're just going to
more natural. Yeah.
I would say combat arms guys, it's just going to be like, yeah. And if you are one of those combat arms guys that's trying to help and tutor and train people, remember that, you might get frustrated and be like why is the communication so weird? It's like, dude, dial it way back and remember how how dumbed down it was for you in basic and all the weird stuff that you did at boot camp.
And like also think about, like, yeah, it comes naturally to you, but that's because it's been like literally brainwashed into your brain.
Yeah, you've been conditioned to do it.
And that's what it is. So I think that's important that's almost an important lesson for anything as far as training. Like, that's something that me and you kind of had to learn. Like,
we did.
It's like, yeah, there was a lot of behind the scene work that you kind of forget about.
Yeah, we were jumping into stuff. I remember doing training, we would jump into certain things, and I remember being like, we'd talk about it after and be like, man, that was like, we're going to have to like go way, way, way basic with it.
Yeah.
Like, there's like fundamental things that I just didn't even think about. Like, I just assumed they'd be there because they are for me.
Yeah.
Like, it's so fundamental that it's like, it almost just feels like that's just
like
common sense.
Human nature. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's, and I'm not saying that in a disparaging way. It's just, you just don't it was honestly it was a realization for me that I had failed in the training I'd put together at that specific time. 'Cause I was like, oh, I got to start like ground zero. Like straight up, the whole crawl, walk, run thing is very applicable. So again, I just come back around to say, yeah, that applies to a lot of things, but specifically to this, when you're talking about movement through an urban area, rural areas too, but like Steven said, you've got a lot more, you've got more margin in a rural environment. You can avoid things so much easier because it's rural. You can just be like, let's just not go on this road. Let's just go a way around it.
Yeah.
You can't do that in an urban environment in most cases. If you have an area that you have to go to, well, that's where you have to go. And there's only so many, ways to get there that are built by man,
Yeah.
So that ability to maintain security, move carefully, quietly, and without being identified as much as possible is important. And that takes a lot of security chemistry between your team and the ability to communicate clearly. And so as you train for that, just over communicate, like make a point to verbally communicate what you're doing. And I would say that's the good rule of thumb for everything you do when you're first starting to learn capabilities.
Yep. So getting back into patrolling, trying to get to your objective rally point or your ORP. If you're in a rural area, it's going to be the same type of stuff. LDA crossings, water crossings, all the stuff that you got to make sure that you're doing and being smart about. Your seals, all that good stuff. Patrol-based procedures, we kind of got into that, but yeah, same stuff applies. When you get to your ORP, that's when you're going to set up your patrol base. Same thing we're looking for. We're looking for a good canopy if we can. We're looking for a good area that's got not only cover but also concealment, and or not only concealment but cover as well. Something that you can spread out a little bit, and that way if someone were to just throw a grenade or whatever, it's not going to just kill everyone in it.
Yeah.
Mortar strikes, things like that. And then you're going to establish security within that patrol base, making sure that not everyone's, grabbing food at the same time.
Yeah.
Make sure that you always have security, and same stuff that we covered last time. Once you get to this point, depending on the movement, similar to last time, if you don't want to kick out your leader's recon right away, you can hold off and let everyone kind of get gathered in, but
settled.
Eventually you are going to kick out your leader's recon. That's going to consist of some form of leadership, and what I like to use is if you got any guys that are set up with platforms, like whether that's kind of like a sniper setup or something more like a designated marksman type setup, pushing someone like that with them, just giving them more capabilities as far as because they are moving with a smaller team. They're already small to begin with, and now you're moving with an even smaller team. This would be like 3 guys is what I would try to shoot for. They're going to give their GOTWA, so where are they going, others going with, time of my return, what to do if I don't return, and then actions taken if I'm shot or you're shot, kind of thing.
Yeah, and if we're using a lot of acronyms and stuff and kind of moving quick here, but like Steven said, we broke a lot of this down in great length in the rural reconnaissance episode. It's 2 episodes ago, so there's the one right before this one was the intro to cold weather warfare, and then rural reconnaissance, which I'll have it linked in the description. But and this is where kind of big boy rules, like start writing these things down. If you're really taking this seriously and you're trying to learn this stuff, be intentional and take some notes, because these little acronyms, they're very army, but they work, man, and it's easy to remember. They're easy to teach. That's the really good thing about them, and they apply to a lot of different capabilities. It's not just reconnaissance. These are just basic patrol things. While I'm already just taking up the airwaves here, I wanted to really quick talk about and Steven, you could probably add more to this too, but Steven just mentioned patrol based procedures, and then objective or ORP or objective rally point. Like he mentioned, finding a place with good canopy. Again, like some of the things we talked about in the last time, but in the urban setting, what does that look like? Well, parking garages are a great option for that. They're concrete usually, so not only are they can they offer concealment, but they offer cover as well. They're covered by a roof, which is great, so you're able to be hidden from aerial assets. They offer a good vantage point, especially because they often have different levels. You can travel up and down them quickly, and you can actually defend them very well. So parking garages are great locations for that. Just remember, anything with urban, it and this goes back to your planning, like the enemy you're against matters, because you don't want to if you're fighting an enemy that has fire support capabilities or like aerial assets and stuff like that have weapons on board, then you don't want to stay in one place for too long, because you're just going to get blown up. Yeah. So
yeah, if you don't have a rule setting that you're moving through to get to your desired reconnaissance spot, everything is going to need to be expedited substantially. Like, you're not going to want to like get comfortable in a patrol base setting.
Yeah.
That's going to be, hey, we're holding up here. I'm going to push out, do a quick leaders recon, and then we're going to move, because anything in the city, you just do not want to get stuck. Unless you get to your position that you're actually trying to get to.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're going to be kind of stuck there. But for the most part, I would say, that patrol base, if you're looking at in an urban setting and you're not outside in the wood line, you're looking at like a very quick, hey, we're just setting up here for now. Our leaders recon's pushing out, and we're going to try to beat feet out of here, because we don't like. I mean, it may be a good spot, but you try to pick the best spot you can, but like you're not always going to have like a great spot prior to that. So your patrol base may look more like a kind of like a security halt within like a building outside of the building that you're trying to get to or whatever. But
yeah, and I mean, and if you've done your job right and you've maintained good security and you've been pretty concealed and you feel good about that you haven't been identified, then you can measure that accordingly. But yeah, you need to be quick. You need to be moving with a purpose and being clear and concise. But some other locations too, like anything with an awning of some kind, like you'll see like those like those areas outside of buildings that like drop off points where it's like an awning. Like Home Depots have them all the time, like a big awning that, stuff like that can work, but you don't want to just be out on the street. So, you want to be, like Steven said, moving quick, but just, I'll just give those two examples, but those are examples of urban setting. Obviously you can go in a building and like hang out in a lobby or something, but for me, I'd be looking for areas that have overhead coverage, offer cover and concealment, both. I'd really be looking for that. Is relatively defensible and then easy to get into and get out. So infill and exfil, you can be fast. You're not funneling through like one door.
Yeah,
something that would be quick to get in and out of. And then something that doesn't require like a lot of advanced tactical stuff to get into. So like going into a building and then hanging out in a more confined area, it's going to require a whole other envelope of tactical skills to safely get into that and then safely get out of that. So that kind of goes into the infill exfil side of things. But then having good observation, that's my biggest problem with going inside like confined buildings, is that now you're regulated to looking out windows, which is easy to spot. You're moving blinds around and shuffling out a window and opening like that stuff for counter reconnaissance is easy to spot. You can get blown doing that kind of stuff. So
yeah, and all this to be said too, for the modern Minuteman too, going deep inside of a city setting is not going to be smart. If you can get a good urban view from one building end to like a city where you're not having to push through an entire city objective just to get to the point that you're trying to do reconnaissance out of, that's going to be ideal. I mean, unless you live in the city, and then at that point you live in a city and you can do reconnaissance straight out of your building that you live in. And that's pretty simple. But I would not suggest like you as a small group of guys like rolling into some big city. Like if you're having to use parking garages and like gazebos and all sorts of weird stuff to set up patrol bases out of, like just watch Black Hawk Down and realize how bad.
I was literally about to say it's hilarious. Keep going. But.
I mean, just watch how bad that can be. And those guys had guys, like they had
tons of guys
and tons of qualified guys. You got Delta Force and Rangers rolling in, and it's like, yeah, we changed up how we do urban warfare after that because it was so poor how it ended up going down. But regardless, like, yeah, there's lessons learned from that, but it's still not great even with the lessons that we have learned.
Yeah.
It's not ideal. So I think like if you got to weigh out the risk and reward on, okay, yes, you could get great reconnaissance from this, but if I got to travel through multiple buildings just to get to this point, and multiple streets, I'm probably not doing it.
Not to mention, you could just elect to do area reconnaissance on that entire urban environment instead, more from the outside looking in, and probably gather a lot of good information.
Yeah.
Instead of getting into like one specific area. But again, I think this whole topic's more tailored towards someone that's within an urban environment.
Yeah.
And you're just surrounded by urban considerations. Even like some of you guys that live in like subdivisions, like you might not be dealing with tall structures, but there's no rural environments around, it's just streets and strip malls and, shopping areas and, neighborhoods and
time just to get out of there,
stacked on, but honestly, Black Hawk Down, I was literally about to bring it up too. They don't get everything right in that movie, and I wouldn't say it's a realistic movie, but the way, especially at the beginning of the movie, the way they're moving through the cities and stuff like that, through Mogadishu, and when everything's kind of coming to a head, and they do a good job of building that tension. You can tell things are about to just go to hell,
Yeah.
Watch that movie. I think probably everybody that listens to this podcast has probably watched that movie, but if you haven't, give it a watch. It's a solid movie. Actually, I kind of want to go watch it again. That movie does a good job at capturing just the dissension into chaos and how rapid that happens.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes from being like they're kind of shuffling around and like, like you just hear them like trying to kind of like shuffle about, and they're like trying to get to where they're going, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, it's like there's just burning vehicles in the streets and firefights and helicopters are crashing, and it just turns into a nightmare fast.
Yeah, and there's no way out once you're in the middle of it.
Yeah,
you're in the heart of the city, and you're just fighting your way out, basically.
And I've served with guys that were there, and they've told I've heard some of the stories firsthand, and like some of the senior, I had a few senior NCOs, like senior, like first sergeant, master sergeant types, that were there. And it's like crazy hearing their stories, but yeah. And there's a lot. I mean, there's tons of historical examples that you can research. Fallujah in Iraq. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Talk about dense. Like if you live in a city, like if you live in Detroit
but a great example of the improvements made from Mogadishu to when we went into Fallujah, because a lot of that stuff carried over, and then we were much more effective.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it was still hard.
Yeah.
Because anything that you're doing, condensed urban environment type warfare, it's going to be rough. There's just no way around it.
But research that stuff, because there's a lot of good data there. And again, that's data from a conventional fighting force with logistical support and air assets and, lots of personnel. So done in a very different way. Conventional fighting forces manage, city-borne combat a lot different than the modern Minuteman would, but still valuable to look at.
Yeah.
A lot of good stuff we can learn from history.
Alrighty, so we're conducting our leaders recon, and we're going to get back to where we're at. So team leader or something, however you have your structure set up, some sort of leadership is out there. They're doing eyes on the objective, and at this point they say, okay, yep, we like it. I like this spot. I like this building. I think it's going to give us a good view on what we're trying to get reconnaissance on. So he'd push back to the patrol base. He would get his teams picked up, and basically they would do a method called cloverleafing around the objective as well as they could. Obviously, if you're in a big city, it may not be as easy to do if you're in the middle of an urban environment. But if you have woods around, like if you're in a rural area that's surrounded by a building, you're going to try to cloverleaf around. Basically, what this means is you're always kind of similar to what we talked about with Skullduggerus. If you're moving toward and away from the objective in a straight line, you're much easier, or you're going to be more concealed, versus like strafing side to side. Something coming straight at you isn't going to pick up your eye as fast. So that's going to be kind of the objective. So your teams are going to cloverleaf around this building, and try to get as much information, whether that's through cameras, taking pictures, or through drawings, drawing down sketches. What you're looking for is like doorways, so entry, exits, roads that are coming in and out, anything you can get as far as information, even down to doorways, like, hey, which way are the hinges on this door? That way you know which way it opens, which way it closes. Just any little bit of information you can get on the building prior to making entry is super important. You're going to set up limits of advance as far as like how far those teams are going to bound in their cloverleafing method. And once they get to that point, they're going to come back and they're going to give the information back to that team leader. And the team leader is going to gather that information and basically come up with a plan on how they want to make an entry on this building. Okay, so, if you have just one team doing the whole thing, they're just basically going around the whole building. Also, set a time parameter. If you can set a time parameter, I think that's super important. That way, like, hey, if you're one of the teams that's bounding around doing reconnaissance, you're like, okay, I've hit this time frame. I've gotten as much as I can get. I'm going to get back because we're taking too long, basically, or whatever.
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is not the area that you're wanting to do reconnaissance on.
No.
The area or building. This is the area or building that you want to do reconnaissance from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gathering intelligence on the building prior to entering.
Yep.
This, obviously, if you already know your area really, really well that you're about to enter, this step's probably not going to be as needed. It still could be used, though. I think understanding, like, if there's enemy or civilians that are outside of the building, you can figure out, okay, we got people over on the east side of this building, so we're definitely not going to want to enter from that area. So I think there's still importance in it, regardless of how well you know the building. And just because you know the building well doesn't mean that you understand, like, I mean, I know a lot of buildings, but I don't remember how doorways open or if there's, do they got chains and locks like ran across doors and stuff now? Like, have they changed like things from when I last was there? Like, Are we going to need bolt cutters? Are we going to, like, what are we going to need to get through this doorway?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's still important to do. Obviously, if you have drone capabilities, you can cut out a lot of this work. And if you're not worried about using drones, that would be something that you could use from even farther back, flying drones and be like, okay, yeah, this building. That being said, if you have the capability of doing drones, it's like you got to play on the risk and reward of even moving a team all the way into the city to get eyes on when you can just use a drone. So it's like, I don't know. That's kind of a weird one. So if you can fly a drone, then fly a drone and get reconnaissance, come back, top off the battery, fly it back out, and just keep doing it that way. But in a lot of situations, you're talking about worst case scenario, you're not going to have the capabilities of a drone. So you're going to go back to the old school way of doing things, and that's going to be, with humans getting eyes on. So, so they're going to do their cloverleaf. Does that make sense as far as the cloverleaf? Like,
yeah, and I guess just a little further explanation, like, it literally you're walking in the shape and the outline of a clover leaf, but Stephen mentioned that you don't want to be caught strafing side to side, by someone that could potentially be in the area that you're looking at. So that forward motion is like the last motion you're making towards the objective, and then you follow that line straight back again before you start curving back around.
Yeah. Yep, that's exactly how you do it. And make sure that you go far enough back out of sight before you start to circle back around toward the next area that you want to hit. And then when you get to where you want to go in at, then you head straight in toward the objective again.
Yep.
And get eyes on, draw your picture, take your pictures, whatever you got. Yep. And then you're going straight back again. And then you're just going to do that over and over again until you get all the way around the building.
So if you're doing that from a rural setting, then that would be like, you go straight in up to the edge of the tree line or however close you need to be to actually be able to see. and then whether that's with glass or your naked eye or both. And then you go back behind, like the tree, back into the woods where you're not going to be seen strafing. And then in the urban environment, that would be like coming up an alley as far as you absolutely need to go, getting eyes on, and then going back and then strafing behind a building,
Yeah. And your limit of advance inside of an urban setting is probably going to be much shorter. You're probably just going to try to extend your view around the building, just like just so you're not looking down one alley at it. Maybe get 2 different alleys or 3 different alley views from that building prior to entering. But I would say, depending on the situation, I would say not to. You don't want to be out in an urban setting. You don't want to be doing this really. Like you just want to okay, this is a building. We're going in right there.
Yeah,
we're set up, so let's roll. Like I said, everything's going to be expedited if you're actually truly in an urban setting. You don't have any sort of rule concealment. You're just taking a chance at that point, and that's why the whole urban side of things is tough because there's plenty of books that say if things were to actually get this bad, to get the heck out of urban areas.
Yep.
And it's true. You shouldn't be hanging out there. I would say hang out there as long as you can, because just leaving when everyone else leaves is also a death sentence because people are savage. And so waiting out a certain amount of time, prior to exiting out is a smart tactic, but that's a whole different episode in itself. But yeah, I just would not feel comfortable with being oh yeah, we're in this rural area and then we're going to push through this entire giant city to get to this one building that's able to look down on this area of where they're operating. I don't feel like I'd take that chance. I feel like I'd just be I'm going to hang out in my rural area and just watch the city from outside, like what you were saying.
Yeah.
But if you felt the need to do so, we're going to go over it. So here we go.
Or if you had to, because you're within that environment, and you need to use some of these tactics to get out and figure out the best way to get out. You might have to do some reconnaissance prior to building an exfil plan,
Yeah.
So
hopefully you have exfil plans pre-designated
True.
prior to.
Yeah.
There's that as well. It's well, you failed yourself from the beginning. So, so you do your cloverleaf. Once you're done with that, you get back to the team. You're going to show any, doorways, windows, entry points, linear danger areas, avenues of approach, terrain around structure. So if it's got some sort of weird terrain and you were able to pick up on that, then obviously share that. And then potential site placement. So if you're if you get to a point and you're man, that window would be, I feel over there would be a perfect spot to put it, then you have a good idea of kind of what you're trying to get to. You come back, give that information, you discuss it. Okay, yep, I think we're going to enter from this doorway. This doorway looks like the best entry point. So now we get to security and entry of the building. It's super smart to set down a security team, whether that's a sniper team or a gun team or whatever it may be, or just your Bravo team that you're okay, yep, I'm going to set you guys up to pull security as Alpha team pushes up through to the objective. Once you're set that security team, you can push Alpha team up. If you want to bound them forward, you could do that as well, and that's kind of up to you and how the terrain's set up for you to pull it off. But ultimately, your team's going to, your Alpha team or whichever team you've designated is going to enter the building. All right, so this is when we get into a lot, because obviously entering buildings is not the easiest. We kind of talked about this. It's not like you can just kind of roll in.
Yeah.
You're going to have to conduct something we call in the Army Battle Drill 6, which is basically entering, clearing rooms. Your point man's going to have the well, we'll get into that in a second. We'll get into the building. We'll pretend like everyone knows how to do that. But so let's get Bravo team in as well. So Alpha team's going to get in, and depending on how that that first doorway is. If you can't get in just because it's not open, like it may be locked, that's when it's smart to understand kind of your 5 methods of breaching. It's like covert entry, which is ideal for this situation. That would be lockpicking and bypass tools, things that we covered with Sky Pirate, and we barely touched it, but I think understanding those skill sets are super important, especially from the reconnaissance standpoint, because all these other entry methods are pretty loud and can be pretty loud. So that's not something we want to do, is just go in and start banging on doors and blasting doors open.
Yeah.
But I'll blow through these anyways, because I think it's important for you to have, if you're going to be doing urban type work, you need to have maybe not all these tools, but some of these tools, because, and I'll get into that here in a little bit, but I think it's important for your team to have methods of breaching. So mechanical breaching, that's going to be like sledgehammers, Halligan tools, pry bars, bolt cutters, that sort of thing. Your ballistic breaching, breaching shotguns with breaching rounds. Thermal breaching, that's going to be like breach pens and cutting torches, things like that. Explosive breaching, that's deck cord, water charges, things that most of us don't have, but if you do, good for you. I don't want to hear about it. And
I do, but offline.
And that should be it. So why is it important to have this type of stuff? Well, just because that's the method you entered, all these locks that you picked and you're all quiet and stealthy all the way through, doesn't mean if you get compromised, that may not be the way you can exit.
Yeah.
So you potentially have other doors that you have to exit, and you have to exit them quick. These methods are much quicker than lockpicking. So having the capability to use a Halligan tool to pry your way through a door is much quicker, potentially, than lockpicking, unless you just have like a bunch of simple locks. Then some guys might be able to rock through those pretty quick. But
yeah,
I think it's still smart to have the capability to deal with different setups, and that way you don't get stuck in a room. So anyways, so we get inside the building, we get Bravo team push forward. Alpha team's going to turn around and pull security outward outside of the building while Bravo team pushes forward. Bravo team's going to push forward into the building as well. At this point, you're going to have to go through and basically do Battle Drill 6 all the way through the building to the location that you're trying to get to. If all it is it's just one room, then you're there, I guess, which is like super simple. But if it's not, if it's a big structure that you're having to move through to get to the desired location, then you're going to have to do it. There's kind of 2 different ways of thinking about it. You can either clear the entire building, and I'm not going to say one way's right and one way's wrong, because there's time and a place for everything. But you can either clear the entire building prior to getting set up, or you can just clear your way to the point that you're trying to get to. Obviously, the one where you're clearing your way, there's pros and cons for both. Clearing the one all the way to where you're just trying to get to, you're not giving yourself nearly as good a chance of getting caught, because it's quick, it's quiet, and you're just moving to one spot. But you don't have the security of knowing that the building's completely empty or whatever. If you're doing a full building clear, like you're trying to clear the whole building, you got potential of getting caught, getting in a gunfight. Once you get in a gunfight, it's pretty much done. You're fighting your way out at that point. And
the reconnaissance is over.
Yeah.
The reconnaissance mission's over at that point.
Yeah, it's done. So, but you also have the security of knowing that, okay, this building was empty when we entered it. So any kind of noise or something like that you could potentially hear from your hide site later on is like, all right, someone's in the building now, and they weren't here when we came in. So it's going to be up to you how you want to do it. But getting into Battle Drill 6 as well as we can, this is going to be rough, but here we go. Over just voice. Understanding building layouts, so like room layouts, center fed and corner fed. Center fed rooms, just mean the door's directly in the middle of the wall that it enters. Or it doesn't have to directly be, but basically it's not stuck on a far wall, basically. Understanding hallways, LDAs, like how to move through them, like the rolling T. So you don't have to use that. There's a couple different formations you can use rolling through hallways. I always like the rolling T. It gives you security toward the front. It gives you security on the sides, because like when you're rolling through a hallway, usually you got doorways along the side. And then understanding your different types of entry. So you got dynamic entry and deliberate entry. Dynamic entry, there's pros and cons to everything. It's basically a violence of action entry into the doorway. You're moving quick. You're not gathering. You're not pieing or panning outside the doorway. You're basically just rolling straight in. Versus deliberate entry is going to be slower. You're going to pie or pan. Point man's going to pie or pan around the doorway, gathering information from outside prior to entering in. And then once they enter in, they've seen portions of the room prior. Basically, all you haven't seen at this point is like corners and any kind of dead space. So like if there's couches, you can't see behind the couches, obviously from pieing and panning. So just understanding, like, I think from, and it's very dependent, but from a reconnaissance background, or from like a reconnaissance mission, your deliberate entry makes way more sense. It's much quieter. You can move a little slower. You've already gathered information in the room, so you're not so worried about just like trying to get as many bodies in the room as fast as possible, because ultimately your first and second man are going to clear your corners on entry, and that's like your biggest hurdle as far as like that room at that point, because you've already gathered information on the outside of the room. Like, yeah, maybe you haven't gathered everything because it's dark or whatever it may be, but you've done better than your dynamic entry. Another thing with dynamic entry, it's much more effective if you have like flashbangs and devices like that. So, and not everyone has that. They are possible to get, and but they're not like real flashbangs aren't possible to get. So
yeah,
there's arguments that you could use, like there's airsoft type flashbangs out there, but they're not nearly as effective. It'd be more of a distraction device than anything, versus like a true flashbang that like actually jacks you up. So that being said, I would lean toward deliberate entry for this mission type, and there's a lot that goes into that. You're going to want to always have security. So if you have linear danger areas when you're doing your panning, always make sure to pull security with you. And that way you're not ever having your back just with nothing behind you to guard you down a hallway or whatever it may be. But basically you're just going to clear through rooms. So your first man has he'll take whichever, like he's got the right of way. So whichever direction he goes, second man goes opposite. Third man goes the same as first, and fourth man will go the same as the third if the room's big enough. Sometimes the fourth man will just basically be there to pull security. If he wants to roll in the room and then just face back and pull security, then he can. But you can do that all the way through the building. There's a couple different methods to do it as far as multiple teams rolling through it too. You can have alpha team go through a room and just leapfrog. So alpha team pushes through, and then alpha team's like, okay, we're clear up here. Bravo team would then just push up through that room. It's like, hey, we got this doorway. You guys go ahead and push through. Or you can just have alpha team cruise up, and then Bravo team's going to follow basically as you're pushing, and they're just going to have kind of your rear securities plus security, like far security as well, anywhere around. So, trying to think if I didn't mention anything, but
yeah, and this stuff, you know, our intention of going over some of these things isn't to teach you CQB right now. It's to give you the basics and give you things to go research on your own on. Honestly, a great resource for this is Orion Training Group. Those guys are super solid, and all the stuff we've talked about so far, I'm pretty sure they probably have a video on pretty much all this stuff so far. So
they do a
those
great
guys
job.
are awesome, and they're very focused on providing this information for your everyday person. So, and they believe in, you know, they're not trying to gatekeep certain tactics or anything like that, which is cool. And I don't think there are very many other people that are subject matter experts in this area that are doing the same. So
yeah, as far as like free content,
yeah, like open enrollment kind of stuff.
I would say also like go take their classes too, because anyone who's willing to put out that much free content obviously feels confident in what they're teaching. For one, that they're able to still fill classes even though they're giving out free information. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
I think that says volumes about companies that give their audience free content and still have full confidence that they're going to be able to fill classes. But anyways, to go check them out, Orion Training Group. We might tag them in here. I don't know. You want to?
Yeah. I'll link them.
Yeah,
I'll link them below. I think it's applicable to what's happening here, or what we're talking about today. And also, use, these specific things that Steven's talking about, super important. If you're getting a little bit lost in the weeds, just take notes and break off after this and go do your homework. But this is really, really important stuff to understand. Like we said at the beginning, you have to have a fundamental knowledge of how to maneuver and operate within a urban setting, and basic CQB tactics, and entering and clearing rooms is just part of that. So
yep. So anyways, basically that's a really super basic and like the least amount of information on how to actually clear a room. I would highly suggest go watch some videos if you don't know much about it. But yeah, and then once you've done it, go out and practice it, because ultimately you can watch it all you want, but until you go out and do the thing, you don't truly know how to do it. So
yeah, and practice it in your, like, all your stuff.
Yeah,
if you can.
Yep. Yeah, that's another thing to bring up that I didn't bring up. Like, you're doing this all with a sustainment pack on.
Yeah,
because you're going here to stay. It's one thing to do room clearing and stuff like that. It's super easy. I mean, it's still a little tougher than just running completely slick, but like, I think it's super easy to go in and do room clearing with body armor on, personally, because I have so much time doing that. That's like what we did in the military. It's like body armor. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Now throw an Alice pack on your back with a fighting chest rig, and things get a whole lot more. Your footwork comes into a whole lot more play, because in order for you to fit through the doorways properly, especially when you're talking about if you're running a rifle, like you were running last time we went out and trained, you were running your Mark 12. So it's like, It's not a small platform.
Nope.
It's still capable to do the job.
Yeah.
You just got to understand how to manipulate your platform, and also how to properly align your feet in order to enter the door where you're not getting trapped in the middle of the door, because that's the worst thing that you can do.
Yeah, all this push towards really short guns and super slick and compact kit is necessary for this stuff. That's not true. What is necessary for this is a very, very good grasp on the fundamentals of how to do this right. Not being just an absolute buffoon with your footwork, which that just comes to practice, like being confident in your movement and taking good positive steps and moving, relatively quick, but not like rushing around and stumbling around. I mean, you can, like Steven just said, I mean, we were out doing this recently, and we've done it a bunch with like in our past and stuff like that too. But yeah, full rucks, full length platforms with suppressors on board, so you're running a big long can or whatever, and it's still very doable.
Yeah.
Still very doable.
Yep. Also, all this to be said too, you are going in this building thinking this, like, you shouldn't be going into a building thinking that there's people inside. If you think there's people inside, then it's not a good choice to create a urban reconnaissance outside of. So it should be like an abandoned building that you're shooting for. Like that's one thing I want to bring up. Like, yeah, you're still having to treat it like there potentially are people inside, because you never know. But if you think that they're like, if you're like, man, there's people inside here, I'm bailing out and I'm not going in there. So I just want to get that out there really quick, because they're like, oh yeah, you're just going in, you're actually like assaulting this building. It's like, no, we're not assaulting the building. We're just clearing to where we're trying to get to, because that's how you enter rooms and that's how you conduct business inside of a building. I put in here also, communication is super important. So just like outside of buildings and urban settings, communicating with your team and as you move through the building is like one of the most important things. And obviously this isn't you yelling at each other because you're trying to be quiet, but like this is whether hand and arm signals or just like when you're in a stack, like you can get up in your buddy's ear and talk very quietly. But you don't want to be loud. I can say that enough. There is going to be noise being made though, because you're rolling through a building that potentially you know nothing about. There's stuff on the ground that you don't know what the heck you're stepping through. Maybe there's fluorescent bulbs that are broken on the ground, or like a weird stool that just happened to be sitting there that you trip on when you're rolling through. Like, it just happens. There's no way around it. But being smart, moving, that's where it comes into that whole deliberate entry where you're moving a little slower. Not like so slow that you're just like taking forever to get in the room, but like you're being aware of your steps and like how you're placing your feet and all that good stuff. So very similar to like using night vision for the first time, like using your peripherals to like see what the heck you're walking into. Like you should know like, hey, there's a stool there or whatever.
Yeah.
Also getting into the night vision thing, this mission's almost not doable without night vision. I will say that right now. Because
no, dude.
Yeah, like if you're dealing with urban reconnaissance, you don't have the perk of having potential like moonlighting or something like that. Like, yeah, maybe you have some form of ambient lighting in the streets of whatever has power. But if the building has power that you're rolling into, it's not a great building for one, because there's no great way to like hide yourself once you get inside. Like if your room is backlit, if you turn off the lights, that's a dead giveaway. Like, hey, I know for a fact that building had lights on prior, and now it doesn't. What the heck's up with that? So now you got a group of people coming to try to hunt you down because they're like, there's someone in this building. So going into a building that's abandoned, like I originally said, does not have power, is going to be a very dark building.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be able to cruise through with white lights on or even red lights on.
Because that dark building is known by the people in the area to be a dark building.
Yeah.
And if you change that, that's going to draw serious attention.
Yep. So you're going to have to move through this. You're going to have to use night vision. There's no way around it. So if you don't have it,
this is not an available capability to you.
Yeah, this is not going to work. Yeah, it's just the way it is. And you could maybe try to make entry like during daylight so you can get light through the windows, but at the same time, and like in that situation, it's just not good because then there's potential of you being seen as you're entering through this room. And yeah, you're not backlit and the light's outside, so it's going to be hard to see into the building. But man, I don't know if I'm taking that chance. Most things that you're trying to do like without being caught need to be done at nighttime because less security usually is up, and humans don't like to be up at night. So some humans do, but they're the weird ones. So there's that. But yeah. Anyways, that all to be said, you almost need night vision for this mission. And by almost, I mean you probably do need night vision for this mission. So you made your way through the room, through the building, and you've selected a room. Hey, this is the room we want to place the site in. Very similar to rural reconnaissance, like as far as missions that you're setting up. The biggest thing is just like rural reconnaissance, you got to set up your site. So I would establish security just like that, whether that's people in other rooms like you're using either the room that you're in or multiple rooms, depending on the size of that room. Like you may not be able to get everyone in there, but just be smart, set up people where you can see avenues of approach, but you're not so spread out that you can't communicate back to each other. So set that up, and then you'll have one team set up security, one team that's going to set up the hide site. Hide site's going to be basically just whichever room you've decided to choose. You'll use we like to use burlap, like black burlap sacks. They work pretty good. But basically like a mesh netting of some sort to drape over the windows. You don't want it to have it directly on the window, depending on how it's set up. If you already have like blackout curtains or something like that in the room, use those to your advantage. I would say this though, if there's a bunch of curtains that are blacked out in there and you have to open one of the windows to look out, that's probably going to be a red flag to anyone that's outside. If they're actually doing a good job, they're going to look and be like, wait, that window had a curtain in front of it and now it's open. That's not good. So that's going to help you kind of dictate like which room you decide to use. It's like, okay, I got to find a room that actually has at least one window that's open already so I can use that.
That should be done by your initial.
Yeah. If you were able to gather that, then that's why I said potential site placement, because that would be one of the things you'd be looking for. That being said, if I'm the enemy in that situation and all I have is one window that's open looking toward my area, I'm probably keeping a good eye on that window. So yeah, it's tough, but I mean, you got to do what you got to do. So, so get to that window. You're going to run like a curtain. I've seen a lot of people like 45 them off the window, and some people will just drape them over the window. And we've kind of tested this. I haven't really seen much of a difference between the two. I would say that the 45 may let more light in, so it's more natural in the eye or something. But even then, I couldn't tell the difference. So I would, I don't know, play with it, see what works best for you. I would say just practicing this in like your house or something like that, and going outside and looking at it. It's pretty incredible how well it works, though.
Yeah.
Basically, it just makes it so during whether day or night, if you're looking through optics, you're not able to see in there. It just almost basically makes that reflection come back at you like it's like a really dark room in there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it doesn't look like anything's there. It's literally you're artificially creating that effect where, like Steven said, the reflection's too great, and you just can't feel like you can get a good vantage point to like penetrate that reflection and look into the window.
It's almost like tinting a window.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like window tint on a vehicle. And
it's crazy. Like you do that simple little method, either drape it with some burlap, some darker, something that you can see through, which I'm sure you'll get into in a second.
Yeah.
From the inside.
Yep.
And that does let light through, because if you just did like a sheet, well, then it's not letting any light through. Light's going to bounce off of that sheet, so you're going to see it from the outside. Yeah. And then also you can't see through it from the inside, so bad both ways. But more focusing on the outside perspective, like people potentially trying to look in, it just looks like an open window that has a dark room behind it. You just can't, it does not look like anything's there. And you can have somebody standing literally right in the window, and you just won't be able to see them. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, it's wild. I wouldn't, like, obviously understand that it can be beaten, so I wouldn't just be like, just moving around like right behind the mesh thing. Like, you still want to be smart. Like, you don't want to just, but it is pretty effective.
Yeah.
Especially if your lighting conditions are good on the outside. Like,
yeah,
when we practiced it, it was almost impossible to beat.
Yeah. And the only way we could defeat it is if you shined an extremely powerful light directly at it.
Yeah.
And if somebody was standing right there, but if somebody was back in, back in defilade, back into the room, you still couldn't see him, which is where you should be, but we'll get into that.
Yep. So similar to what he was saying, another thing from the outside too, what's great about Windows is thermal devices you can't see.
Yep.
It just picks up whatever the heat temperature of that window is usually. And by usually I mean
always.
So
yeah.
So you're not too worried about thermal, unless for whatever reason the windows are broken out, then that's going to be a problem. But
yeah.
And then at that point, it's probably not a good choice because you want that protection.
Yep.
It's too easy to get caught otherwise.
I would say that's one of the biggest pros of urban reconnaissance is that you have an automatic way to defeat thermal.
Yeah.
And it's not out of the ordinary. Like
no.
People that operate thermal optics understand they can't see through windows. But don't touch the window, because if you change the temperature, you'll be able to see, we've played with this before, where if you put your fingers on the window, that the window will get hotter in those areas.
Yep.
And you'll literally see fingers, on the window. So if you're not touching the window, then again, the thermal's only picking up the infrared or the thermal signature of the window pane, the pane of glass itself. So yeah, it won't see through it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, so getting into another smart thing to do is to have basically kits built out for urban reconnaissance. That's something that we have done, and basically it's just 2 different bags or how many teams basically. So if you only have one team, then that's all you got. Then you have one bag. Or you can have, if you got 2 teams and you got 2 bags or however size of an element that you got. But honestly, I wouldn't be going in with much more than 2 teams because that's just crazy. Having an external security would be better used, I feel like, if you had more guys. And that would look like maybe snipers or something farther back either in a different building or in a rural area that's looking out on the building that you're in. But yeah, so there's that. So yeah, for setup, obviously, you're 550 cord. We like to use 550 cord or D rings. We have D rings in there. We got little magnetic hooks that we have in there as well. If you're in metal structures, then you can just hang them off magnets. You can also use something that we want to add is the adhesive hooks that work great. So basically, you just have the little peel and stick things that you'll see in bathrooms and stuff for hanging up towels, but just the small ones. They have them at Home Depot or any kind of little parts store kind of thing, Lowe's, places like that. But yeah, so you just peel off the back, stick it, and then you're able to hang your curtain off that. And so you set up that. You get your if you got 2 guys that are kind of in the observation post, you got 1 guy on a rifle and 1 guy on the notepad. And basically that mesh, you're going to be able to, once you set up your spotting scope or your binos, whatever you decide that you want to use, whatever your preference is, get that. I like to get it on a tripod. That way it's just kind of set up looking at the objective. You're able to get there. It'll burn right through that netting. You'll keep a team of security in place as well while you're doing this, but basically they're going to start their logbooks and the range card. They'll build the range card out. That's important for, obviously, the team that's the 2-man team that's on it at the time isn't going to stay there the entire time. You're going to rotate through that position. And then that way they can get into the location. They can look at what they got and they're like, okay, this happened at this time through the logbook. And also here's your range card. So we know that building's at this distance. So if I ever have to engage, I can. Hopefully you don't have to, but it's still smart to know. So same kind of reports. We're going to be using the salute report. So size, activity, location, uniform, time, and equipment. That's, size of the element. Activity is what they're doing. Location as far as grid coordinates. And uniform, if they're wearing multicams or whatever it may be. Time that you saw. And the equipment they have, whether that's guns, if they got, they're fueling up these trucks. They got fuel cans or whatever it may be. But,
yep.
So,
and on that, really quick, we talked about it in the rural reconnaissance, but record everything.
Yeah.
If you see anything at all, Like, even if you're like, oh, that guy's just walking around, like, write it down. Like, if somebody walks through at, 02:35 in the morning and goes into the porta potty and uses it, write it down. Write down the description of what that person looked like, what they're wearing, because again, we're here to gather information, and not all information is intelligence. But if you don't have any information, you don't have any intelligence. Yep. You need the information, and then you need to go through that later. So it's indiscriminate. Like if you're on a highway or if you're near a highway and there's like a lot of vehicles going in and out, I guess this is not really a hostile environment, I guess, in that case, but it could be. Like if there's a roadway that's just filled with vehicles and it's constant, then obviously that's, you could just write down active roadway or something. But anytime that normalcy gets changed, like a vehicle pulls off into the area you're observing, or a vehicle stops on the side of the highway or whatever, or if there's like a constant flow of people coming in and out, anytime there's something that sticks out, like there's use common sense. Like you can't physically write down everything if there's something like that in your environment. But yeah, if you're observing an area and you see basically anything that you think could be of value, then don't play the game of like, that wasn't a big deal. Like just write it, just log it, write it down.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you're going to be doing it from, your position that you're set up in is going to be not right up on your mesh net that you have in front of the window. You're going to be slightly farther back into the room. Obviously, the farther back in the room, the darker it gets. So that's preferred. Depending on how long you're going to be set up there for a while, you can create something called like a dark room, which is basically you string up 550 cord, or something we used in the military was PVC pipe kits, but you got to have like, if you got that, then you got a lot of dudes basically that you can roll in and pull that off with. But basically you just set up like a structure that you could hang up blacked out sheets around that observation post, and you basically create like a short room that they're hanging out in. And that allows you to run like tough books and things like that outside of that little blacked out room that you've created that is an observation post. And when it gets night out, all the other rooms, all the other windows that you have in that surrounding area, you've blacked out as well. And you've like blacked out. So whether that's you set up a mesh, you got your mesh window. If it's all that it is mesh that you have in front of the window, you're going to have to like hang up blacked out sheets around, like set off the room to like make sure that you've created like basically like a little blackout room for you to work in.
Yeah.
You can also just create a blacked out room that you're running your tough book and stuff out of as well. So creating that in like a separate room that either doesn't have windows, or you just literally create a sheet area for that person to operate in. The convenience of running the blackout room on the observation post is it creates if you're planning on being there for a while, it allows you to be a little less, like movement can happen within that room, and you're not as worried about, like you're still being disciplined, but you're not as concerned. Like when you're actually observing, obviously you got to be like on your game, but outside of that, you got to be, you don't have to do that either. That's optional. I would only do that if I'm planning on being there for like a while.
Yeah.
So, and that just makes it a little bit easier to operate within that building for a long period of time. So as far as observation tools, we kind of got into it, but yeah, you're going to be looking at your spotting scopes, things like that. Obviously, thermal's not going to work in this environment because you can't look in a window, you can't look out of a window. So
yep,
you're not going to be using thermal. Night vision is going to work great, and optics on your weapons, things like that. You never really want to use rangefinders, but they don't work through windows anyway, so it's like there's that. It's not going to work through the glass.
Sometimes they do.
Yeah, maybe
they kind of can. It depends on the rangefinder, what kind of wavelength it sends out. because it's sending out an active signal, that basically goes out, hits the object, and I think some of them are based on time, I believe. So some of them have to reflect back, and it's, it calculates how much time that took, for that signal to get sent and then reflect back, and that'll tell you how far it is. So that's why going through Windows can be tough. But you can do it through Windows, depending on the type.
Okay.
There's some that do work for whatever reason. So
weird. Either way, it's not smart to do because it gives out like an IR signature basically that you can see. And maybe not all of them do, but I know for the most part, most like your standard off the shelf rangefinders aren't going to be great because it's basically just shooting a laser straight out. So you're going to continue to improve the site, obviously, throughout the time that you're there, making it a little bit more better for your guys. That's going to improve on just like mindset a little bit, I think, more than anything. Just making it so it's not as miserable for everyone that's there. If you're running comms, like if you have an MSS outside of the building, like out in a rural area that you're able to get information to, you can do that. But you're going to be rolling off comm windows as well. Comms is always weird. They're a blessing and a curse all in the same. I don't think that you should plan to always have that ability, especially if you're talking about facing a larger military. They're going to be able to track you down. Even smaller capabilities can track you down. So it's like, it's not super hard to do. And then creating a rotation inside of your plan. So whether that's you're going to be in security, whether you're going to be on the observation post, or you're going to be like in your downtime as far as sleeping, eating, whatever you may be doing. And then hygiene and restroom in this area, it's rough, man. Pretty much everything you do, you're taking out with you. So that's going to be like you're pooping in MRE bags again. We're back to it. Yeah. And you're bagging it up and throwing it in your ruck, and you're taking it with you. You may have toilets and things like that, but more than likely they're not going to work. So don't even just plan on not even having that as a capability. It is what it is. It's you
gotta think about noise too, like plumbing running and stuff like that, and toilets flushing. Like that makes a pretty identifiable noise.
Oh yeah, you definitely
yeah. So just a lot of that,
Yep. Procurement as far as water, food, and supplies. Supplies are going to be kind of nice for this setting. Way better than like being rural. If you're one of those MacGyver types, you can use a lot of the stuff that you find throughout the building. Even like when you're doing your room clearing and you find stuff along the way, if you think that it could be useful, just pocket that bad boy and just keep rolling. Your food, not so much. I mean, unless there's just like food that's there. I mean, and you're talking about, okay, do I take a chance at eating this and I potentially get sick and then I'm got diarrhea and I'm getting dehydrated and now it's a failed mission because I'm gonna die here if we don't get out of here and get some sort of water. It's like that becomes an issue as well. So like understanding what you packed in and being prepared is super important, I think, for the urban setting. And then as far as water is super tough as well. In an urban setting, like, yeah, you might have like little collection points where rainwater is gotten that you can harvest water from, like whether that's like in gutters or like, I don't know. Just like where water's still, but then you got the issue of like, how long has it been sitting there? Is it like, what's going on in the city? Is it like a lot of pollution and crap that you potentially could get, and then you run in the same situation where you're peeing out of your butt and you can't you can't keep water inside you, and then you're dehydrated and you're hurting. So it's not a great way to go. So making sure to have water and food, I think it's super important for an urban setting. And if you don't have it, then you're going to be hurting. So As far as emergency evacuation and evacuation, your standard evacuation would just be, I would exit the same way I came in. You know the most about that area, especially if it was one of those situations where you didn't clear the whole building. You just cleared to the point that you were trying to go. I would exit the exact same way I came in, but I would exit doing CQB as well. And same way you go in, like you don't just like, oh, well, we already went through this a couple days ago and there was nothing. Like, no, you got to treat it like there's potentially you're going to run into someone. So you're going to do all the same stuff on the way out and exit. You're going to get to that point. One team's going to pull security as the other team pushes out of the building, and then you're going to turn around, pull security for them as they exit out the building, and you're going to make your way through the city that way. Or if you're just going into the wood line from there, then obviously you can push into the wood line and then set up and then get out. As far as emergency evacuation, you may not be given the opportunity to exit the same way that you came in, and it's going to get bad for you. So it's not going to be good, especially if you're talking about a conventional army. You're going to get probably shelled with everything they got, because they don't want you to survive. So you're going to be potentially attacked with troops. You might get air assets. You might get a whole bunch of stuff. So it's going to be really bad for you, and you're more than likely going to die, but you're going to do your best. So so emergency exit, yep, that's where your other some of your other breaching tools may come into play. You may have to exit out a different direction, and then a lot of it's going to be, it may not be able to be well planned for, because if you come out of the building in some direction of like some area you know nothing about, well, now you've turned into like very similar to a Black Hawk Down situation where you're just basically trying to fight your way out the city.
Yeah.
And you don't have anyone coming for you to QRF you out. You may have like a sniper team set up that might be able to cover, give you support fire, like if they're out in a rural area, like waiting for you, but you still got to get to them in order for them to do anything for you. So it's like, and if they're in a building, they don't want to compromise their position either. So it's like, it's awkward. That's a weird situation. So it's like, that's why I think it's super important that you understand that this mission is very, like, the only way you're doing this is if, for one, you have to, and for two, like, you feel like you have a good enough location that you can pull it off and be successful in. But yeah, so that's pretty much your surveillance site in the building.
Yeah.
There's not much to it. I mean, ultimately, once you get set up, it actually becomes pretty easy inside that building.
Yeah.
You're still having to be disciplined as far as light and sound and things like that. But you're in, so you're like, as long as you're being quiet, you're good to go. What?
I don't know. It just reminded me of one of the trainings we did where we did like a
what?
We did I don't even remember. It was a while back, but we had everybody in there and we practiced like a kind of a 100% up, like alert in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And it was pretty like some of the people we were training with, it was like their first time ever doing anything like that. And I just remember it was like super loud. It just sounded like a herd of buffalo. And it was just like zippers were going and people were kind of like, mumbling, and a white light went poof, like flashed on and flashed off, and just like,
we're dead.
Steven goes, what? I said, what do you want to do? And I said, just tell everybody to go back to sleep because we're dead anyways. We might as well sleep a little bit. It was just like, it was literally like, what do you want to do? Yeah, just tell everybody to get back in their bags and go to sleep because we're just about to be dead anyways in a few minutes.
It was so bad.
Yeah. Oh, it's good learning and good learning.
Well, and
stuff,
that's why you got to get out and do it. That's another thing. Yeah. So if you, for whatever reason, I think that's a smart way to do it. Like, obviously in the middle of the night, you're going to only have a certain amount of people up.
Yeah.
Everyone else will be asleep. If you, for whatever reason, hear someone in the building, or it's smart to start waking people up, but understand that, like,
you gotta stay quiet.
You gotta stay quiet, like getting up. And but I think it's smart to go up to 100% security at that point. Like, make sure everyone's at least able, like, because there's nothing worse than like having to go mad dash evac straight out of your sleeping bag and you're sound asleep, and like you're having to just like try to make thoughtful decisions as you're exiting out this building while you're half asleep. So getting everyone up to where they can kind of like at least like
get their wits about them.
Yeah, get their wits about them before they have to just like mad dash out. If you're able to pull that off, I think it's smart, and no one's going to be mad at you for doing that. So there are going to be times though that like you should also train for just the mad dash out of your sleep, because there's times where that is very possible. Like, hey, we are getting out now. So, and that's something else that we've practiced as well, which is always delightful.
It's hysterical. Yeah.
And it's not great, but I mean, it's actually pretty quick. Like it moves pretty fast.
But you got to practice it for sure.
You do.
And literally do it when you haven't had a lot of sleep. Like,
yeah,
you know, if you just are like wide awake and you practice that, like there's skills you can isolate for sure. Like I think you should practice like moving quickly, like exfil kind of stuff, like get those skills down. But there's things that like do it in the way that it would be like coming out of a dead sleep.
Yeah.
To just like immediately packing your stuff and leaving. Like that's tough.
Yeah, it's way tough.
Try it.
Getting into your mission surveillance site, if you even have one. So I didn't really cover this because it's not always applicable, but if you do have one like in a rural area outside that you're able to still get communication from, it's kind of smart because they can gather information. They can kind of be your like head shed that's like, you know, they can also gather resources for you too if absolutely need be. It's not really ideal because it would require you like pushing back out to get the stuff and then pushing back in. So very, very dependent on how you're set up, like how the site is. If the building you're in is right along the side of a wood line, and then it's probably actually fairly doable. But you're not always going to have that luxury, I guess. So, but same thing for them. They're going to be basically in like a small patrol base, range cards, getting made from all their security guys, working on priorities of work, making sure they got overlapping sectors of fire, note gathering that's pushed from the serve site to them, comms. They're going to be hitting their comm windows. Something I brought up in the last podcast or last episode that we did on rural reconnaissance was comm windows are also like a good backup plan for understanding like where your team is, like if they're good to go. If they miss like one comm window, it's like, okay, that's a problem. If they miss two, then you're like, oh crap, like something's bad.
Yeah.
So resupply, small unit sustainment, I kind of brought that up, but this could just also be like, hey, they're coming out, we're exiting out, but at least the MSS has like, they can restock everyone's water and like, hey, plus everyone up basically from the amount of days they've been out there, because they haven't had the capability to do that. So, and then you maybe have to make a long movement as well outside of that position. And then they're going to continue to improve the site and then have emergency evacuation and evacuation plans. So very similar to the last episode we did on rural reconnaissance. It's pretty much the same thing. The only difference is their communication is going to be a little bit more tough. You can try to use directional antennas, but it may not work depending on the structures that you're dealing with, because radio waves are weird when it comes to buildings. So something you need to play with. If that's something you live in, you need to make sure that, hey, does my gear work for the area that I live in? Because I think it's important to understand. But yeah, that's that.
Sweet.
And then your other teams, so sniper teams and gun teams. Like I said, if you can have them placed in from a different objective, and yeah, they're not right on the objective viewing, because if that's what they were doing, then there's no point to even send in a reconnaissance team at that point. But yeah, they're just more of a security element, and they're going to be kind of just self-reliant. for themselves. They're going to be their own separate team. But yeah, they're just going to be rock and rolling. If they're in like a more rural setting, they'll probably be set up very similar to how we talked about in the rural reconnaissance. Like you can dig in, you can do all that stuff. So especially if you're planning on being there for a few days.
Yeah.
And get comfortable and just get ready to rock and roll. But yeah, so that's a super summarized version of urban reconnaissance, I guess. Pretty much. I mean, a lot of that stuff is carried over from the rural reconnaissance, and I think that's why that's such an important place to go out and learn the skills first. For one, it's hard to practice urban reconnaissance unless you have like a big, well, you can do it in your house, I guess, technically, but
yeah.
So that's a possibility, but like for like going through this full steps of entering and doing all this good stuff and like actually practicing going into a building that you don't know a ton about, it's kind of hard to do from just like your everyday person.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the rural reconnaissance, you can go out to any big chunk of land and just rock and roll with.
Yeah.
And depending on where you live there, that might not be very possible either, but we've kind of gotten that in other episodes, looking for like areas that you can go train in.
Yeah.
And that's where that would apply.
Yeah, I think the biggest things or the most important takeaways from the urban subdiscipline of reconnaissance is like your route planning and your movement to the objective. Super important to really plan out well and to be good at.
Yeah.
It's hard, a lot harder to do than in the rural setting. Your site selection is just gotta put some thought into the site selection. Like you have to. A lot goes into that. I mean, it's all the things that we mentioned, but also like, can you actually see what it is you need to see from that site?
Yeah.
That's hard to see, or that's hard to know all the time from looking at the building and then trying to get a rough idea of what its vantage point of the objective is.
Yeah.
Then surveying that site, the surveillance before the surveillance, like that's super important. You don't want to walk yourself into a death trap. Also, you need to have a good understanding of like what the capabilities are of the enemy that you're surveilling, because counter surveillance is an absolute thing.
Oh yeah.
And if it's a good spot for you, it might be a good spot for them. And it's not unheard of for a surveillance team to walk in on a surveillance team. That happened all the time in World War II. Like,
yep.
You'd have the Allies looking at a structure to go into, to utilize, to kind of operate out of, and they'd walk right on top of, Axis forces. And then you're in a CQB battle all of a sudden in the middle of a structure that you thought was abandoned. So lots of things you got to be paying attention to. That's tough. This is why it's such a risk. And then the next big takeaway is taking the time and having the patience and taking the time and focusing on the details to really build that site out to be usable and to be hidden and to go out of your way to not disturb anything that could give you away and blow your cover. And then
leaving everything how you found it if you can,
Yep.
Like obviously there's going to be things that get moved around slightly.
Yep.
But for the most part, you're also another thing I didn't really bring up was your takedown and you're putting up the structure and taking down the structure. Super smart to do at nighttime. That's going to be your best time to do most of your movement type stuff. So you can do it in the daytime a little bit, depending on how you're set up, because you have that external light with you being in a dark room. You're pretty hidden, but it's like you also have more people up during the daytime. So I kind of brought that up, but like just if you're not emergency evacuating out, then it's smart to do everything at night. So all your big movement type stuff. So, but yeah, having that building structure set up, like where you were going with that, just understanding how to, black out the windows. That's something that certain materials are going to work better. Like we used a couple different materials before we settled down with that mesh material. And all the materials worked pretty decent as far as making it hard to see through from the enemy side. But from an optics burning through side, the material that we ended up with last seemed to work the best for that. I felt like the optics burnt through it pretty well, and you could still see pretty clearly what's going on. So that's not something that's like, okay, yeah, this is the way to do it. It's just something you're gonna have to get out and do. But the mesh or the black burlap that we had gotten seemed to work really, really well.
Yep.
But yeah.
Anything else on it? We kind of get to the end of the road.
Yeah,
here.
I would say understanding your, like you said, your movement, but also like just CQB tactics in general is a must for this mission. If you don't know how to do that, then there's no point to even try. Focusing on the ability to do that, I think, is very similar to if you don't know how to patrol. You shouldn't be trying to go through the woods and do reconnaissance out in a rural area either.
Mm-hmm.
You got to know the basics as far as this stuff to get in position otherwise. And that's why we talk about, like, if you can do, rural reconnaissance, you can do most things out in a rural area as far as patrolling and things like that, because you got to know all those disciplines.
Yep.
Same thing with the urban reconnaissance. If you know how to do urban reconnaissance, you also know how to clear a room, and because you're basically doing that, you're just, hopefully you're not getting in conflict. You're not going through to like assault an objective or something like that. But
yeah, and that's why I think the focusing on the deliberate CQB tactics are going to be one. I think they're underutilized.
Yep.
I think they're, when people think CQB and enter and clear a room, they think like, flashbang and like all four in the room as fast as possible. Like that's kind of the image in a lot of people's heads, and that stuff's super important. And you should understand the fundamentals of that, like, your points of clearing your points of domination and all that kind of stuff, and getting everybody in the room is efficiently as possible. But really leaning into that deliberate side and being very thoughtful with it, I think, is super important for this. And it's, I believe, just another side of the same coin of CQB. Like, you should have both capabilities down.
Yeah.
It's not all one, and honestly, I would argue that the deliberate tactics are far better for the modern Minuteman than the dynamic tactics.
Yeah, there's a time and place for dynamic, I think, for, if you're worried about construction of a room or whatever, like if you're dealing with all sheetrock walls, doing a deliberate entry isn't super smart, because if there's an enemy on the inside, and they see you do a deliberate like panning or something like that, then they're just going to pepper the walls and your whole team gets killed. So it's like, okay, well, that might be a situation where I want to just go dynamic and just roll in and get everyone in the room, because I got a better chance of survival in that situation. But that's just time and experience doing CQB type training, like thinking about like, okay, what's the worst case situation? Okay. And that's when your point man's going to alternate throughout. And that's why it's important for everyone to know how to do everyone's job, depending on like, you're not going to roll into a room and like you got this hallway that's in this, or like an open door that you need to roll through. You're not going to like, okay, well, I'm the point man. I'm over here on the far side of the room from that doorway. Let me like push all these guys out of the way so I can get in the front man again. Like you're just gonna roll like fluently through the room. So understanding how to do everyone's job, whether you're, the first man in the stack or the last man in the stack, like you know how to do it. So, it's just time, dude. It's just time of going out and working on it. Like guys who do this for a living, like you look at like the tier 1 guys that like, that's like their main job is entering and clearing rooms. It's just time with each other, just running through it. They know what each other are going to do. And it's like understanding the basics very, very well, basically.
Yeah.
And that's all it is.
And that's a lot of, I think that right there is where, the the responsible and ready citizen, the modern Minuteman, the whatever you want to call it. Mastery of the basics.
Yep.
Basic infantry, rifleman skills.
Absolutely.
And then, you know, some of these sub-disciplines that pair well with the modern Minuteman mission, like reconnaissance. I think you hang out in that realm and you really, really work on that, focusing on small unit capabilities, but from a basic level, but just really working on the mastery of that, like doing it so much that you can almost do it in your sleep as a team. Like, man, that's going to set you apart, and you're going to be cohesive and lethal.
Absolutely. Yep.
It's amazing what a small group can do and continue to do throughout history, regardless of the technological advancements and capabilities of a force they're against. I mean, some modern examples of that, the U.S. and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Time and time again. I mean, we talked about this in our episode, Lessons Learned in Afghanistan, where me and a guy I deployed with over there were on, and we talked about like how incredible it was to see how well they were able to utilize guerrilla tactics and harassment methods, and, you know, just annoying tactics to cause an effect, you know, like were they just straight taking everybody out? No, but they made it really hard to do anything. And at the end of the day, who's got control of Afghanistan now?
Yeah.
The Taliban. It's back in Taliban control again. A lot of that's due to, you know, political crap. But point is, we didn't defeat that enemy while we were there.
No.
They mastered their environment, and they understood what worked for them, and they honestly were masters of reconnaissance. Those guys.
Yeah.
And yeah, lots of lessons to be learned. That's just one example. I mean, it's time and time again throughout history we see it.
They're in their own backyard, man, and that's if you understand how to utilize that in your you know, in your environment, then it's beneficial heavily. And that's where, you know, us as Minutemen, that's what we have as a benefit, is we understand our current location we live in. We know it, we should know it better than anyone else, you know what I mean? So
yeah, and be intentional about that. That's something we've talked about in the past, about like you know, navigating your own backyard, your own community shouldn't be a challenge. You should know all of your back roads. You should know where they go. You should understand what routes lead you where, the most efficient ways to get there. Another thing you can do, which is just free passive, you're able to do it now, is, you know, and this is something that that everybody can just start doing, including myself. Just go visit buildings you've never been to.
Yeah.
Like public buildings and stuff, or maybe even if they're just private and you can at least, you know, there's a public access where you can go in, like maybe they have a lobby or something. Just random, you know, go downtown and just look around. Like, I guarantee you there's random buildings you've never set foot in.
Absolutely.
No reason why you haven't. Like, just go in there. Even if it's just like, hey, could I use the bathroom? No, we don't let people. Okay. Well, just from that interaction, you've learned a bunch about that building. Like, look around, take note of it, you know, like that's free and easy. And the more information and the more familiarity we can have with our own community, the better.
Yeah.
And that's not just for this stuff. That's not just for the reconnaissance and stuff like that, but it's just for everything. Like, you might pick up on something that you've never noticed before that is affecting your community now, you know?
Yeah.
Like things like human trafficking immediately come to mind. You know, you never know. So this whole concept isn't just about, you know, like, oh, we put our camo on and we go, like, no, man, this is an intentional effort to work together, build camaraderie, community, and then actually make a difference and help your community.
Yeah.
And that should always be the perspective. And helping it from a morally right and morally good perspective. So, but yeah, start thinking outside the box a little bit. Think about preventative measures. Think about reconnaissance and intelligence gathering methods you can do now in today's environment. And yeah, start building intelligence packets, man. Like,
yeah,
How cool would it be if you and your group had like a very familiar understanding of all the building layouts, and most buildings you can easily request and access like the whole building plan.
Yeah.
A lot of times that's public information.
Yep.
Dude, why not?
Yeah.
You got a whole like understanding of buildings, and then that works for a lot of different things, but God forbid we get to an environment where you're actually having to utilize these skills we talked about today. If your team's just like, oh, this building right here on this street corner is going to be a good spot. It's, it's got woods leading up to the back entrance. Like we can get there unnoticed. Here's the layout. Here's the blueprints of the building. It's 3 stories. There's a bathroom on each story. Like you just have all the information. It's got this many windows. That'd be epic.
Oh yeah.
And then and honestly, it is attainable. It's not like that's hard to do. That can be something that everyone can start doing right now. So, and honestly, I think you should.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've had enough. Have you had enough?
Dude, I've had enough. I think we're going to continue. Well, I know we are. We're going to continue chipping away at Reconnaissance. We've got some other sub-disciplines within the Reconnaissance mission that we're going to get into in future episodes. So stay tuned for that. Again, if you did not listen to Rural Reconnaissance, jump back in there and listen to it, because we broke down in great detail a lot of the things we kind of skipped over today, or we might have briefly mentioned today. And then we also did a Reconnaissance part 1 and 2, which was super basic, again, rural based, but it was like getting into some just super fundamental stuff.
Yeah.
That even gives you more of a very basic intro into the kind of world of reconnaissance. So if you're interested in this, which again, if you believe in the whole modern Minuteman concept, you should be, because it's, I think, one of the most important capabilities for the modern Minuteman. I truly do. Then go back, look into those. Also, the Sniper Cell podcast could be beneficial to you. And there's a few others scattered in between. The podcast we did with Reaper on hunter-killer teams would tie into, the more civil reconnaissance side, probably, which we're going to get into eventually in the future.
Yep.
But yeah, again, like we always say, we love to hear from you, so definitely hit us up. I know the Spotify Wrapped thing is kind of cringy, but thank you to those that that sent them, man. It was cool. It was honestly cool. Like, this year we actually did that, where we like looked to see what our podcast Wrapped stats were and stuff, and so that was kind of fun to see and get an idea of like where people are coming from and how many people are out there. So we really appreciate the love and support, and it's helping a lot. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out. You can contact us at minutemen.initiative@gmail.com. You can also reach out on Instagram. I will say that we are kind of starting, it's still kind of a soft launch, but we're starting to do more on our podcast Instagram, which is Minutemen, or at minutemen.initiative. And then we have our business one, which is Dynamic Defense Solutions, which a lot of people follow already. We'd love it if you followed both. But if you have any questions pertaining to the podcast, or you're a podcast enjoyer, then maybe start trying to just get in the habit of DMing us on our podcast Instagram. I think we're going to try to, just for the business's sake, we're trying to kind of not separate the two, because they're always connected. It's the same, it's one and the same, but just for like organizing, because it gets crazy. Like, we get a lot of DMs, which is awesome. But then sometimes someone will be like, hey, curious about this product, or I'm asking about an order that I placed, and then it'll get like buried underneath, like, I listened to this episode and I was curious about this, that kind of stuff. So it'd be cool to have them, and feel free to message us on either one. But if you have the wherewithal to follow us and message us on the Minutemen Initiative, then that would be cool, and vice versa. These episodes are now available on YouTube. Sorry, dude, I'm just knocking out all the social media stuff because it's in my head. So if you're one of those people that likes to watch/listen, there's not much watching to do because it's not filmed. It's you're gonna just stare at a picture the whole time. that just sits there. I don't even think it has the cool, like, slow movement stupid thing that some people do. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
The slow panning. Yeah. So, but some people for some people, YouTube works really good. So they're all there now. We've linked our RSS feed. So every time we download an episode, it's going to make that noise and shuffle right on over to YouTube. And then also videos are coming out to YouTube. We just launched a little, like, kind of teaser vibe video, but more stuff's coming, and we're working a lot on, like, building a lot of educational content. So you're gonna start seeing our faces here pretty soon on the YouTubes. So lots of cool stuff coming. We're excited about. I feel like it's a year removed. I think we thought we'd be a little farther into this side last year at the beginning of last year, and that's just the way life goes. But we're actually, like, we finally have a lot of the equipment and preparation in place, and we've actually gone out and got footage and stuff like that now and been working towards this stuff. So I think finally this 2024 year, we're going to be launching a lot of that stuff on our YouTube. So
yeah,
we're pretty excited about that. Lots of stuff in the works there. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoyed the urban reconnaissance. Super important. Got to understand it. And we will definitely work and talk on capabilities and disciplines necessary for the urban environment in the future, because we do understand and know that a lot of people are living in those environments.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk a lot about that. And yeah, it's something too that a lot of other people in the gun culture and gun industry kind of area are starting to talk about as well. Like, I know Garantham's been harping on, like, urban survival and stuff like that, which is great. And he's a very qualified person to be talking about that kind of stuff. And there's other people doing it as well. So yeah, at the end of the day, you've got to take this stuff and apply it to yourself and actually go out and test it in your environment. You can, watch videos and listen to podcasts and read books and, watch reels or whatever all day on stuff. But at the end of the day, if you don't go out and put it to work in your environment with your situation and with your gear, your guys, then it means nothing to you. So
yep,
go out and put it to work, vet it, test it, and report back and see how it worked for you. So
cool. We'll catch you guys next time.